Minutes from disaster or safety. Investors around the world wait to hear from the Federal Reserve. And the former finance minister of Greece tells the BBC that a third bailout is now likely. Hello and welcome. You're with World Business Report. I'm Sally Bundock. Also in the programme, we'll have a report on the rise of the self-published novel. But first of all, it's been a very bumpy ride for financial markets in recent weeks. Share prices, international borrowing costs and the currency in people's pockets have all zoomed up and down in value. And the reason? Well, yet again, it's this man, isn't it? The head of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke. He's already told us that he's going to slowly cut back on the $85 billion of cheap money he's been pumping into the world's largest economy on a monthly basis. The question is when? Well, today we could get an answer as the details of the Fed's last meeting are released.
When will the Fed chairman Ben Bernanke start to turn off the tap? It's been the big question in financial markets for many weeks now, and investors are hoping that there will be some clues when the minutes of the July policy-making meeting are published in a few hours. The Fed is pouring $85 billion a month of newly created money into the financial markets. At some stage, as the US economy recovers, the Fed will start to curb that spending. Some economists think that could come as soon as next month. Just the possibility that it will be in the near future has already hit the markets. Share prices are off recent highs, borrowing costs for the US and many other governments have risen, and there's been a sell-off of emerging economies' currencies. India is a case in point. The country's stock exchange in Mumbai has suffered some sharp falls, and the currency, the rupee, has been hitting new lows against the dollar, aggravating the country's inflation problem. It is partly a story of specific obstacles to economic growth in India, but the currency is also affected by a global shift of cash to the US, as investors think that if the Fed does start to cut back its purchases of government debt, the returns to be made from buying those bonds might be on the way up soon. Andrew Walker, BBC News.
Well, I'm joined by Virginie Maisonneuve, Head of Global and International Equities at Schroders, a familiar face on the programme. Nice to see you again, Virginie.
Nice to see you.
Now, you would have thought, given the fact that since the end of May, when we were first given the inclination from Ben Bernanke that this is on their minds, tapering of stimulus, that the markets may have got used to the idea by now, or they still seem very jittery, very on edge?
Well, I think that number one, the markets have gone, very far. I mean, we've done very well in the markets, and there's a sense of complacency and something to do. It's the summer, so refocusing on those issues.
Moving money around
a little bit, but also clearly as time goes by and the latest job numbers were quite good, the sense that we're approaching that time of tapering is going to happen. I think it's not that clear-cut. Clearly, the economy is doing better in the US, but it's not like we're roaring up. And the impact on employment, which we know is very important for the Fed to taper, is going to take some time.
So you don't think today we'll actually get an answer to that question of when?
I think it's unlikely. I think that, clearly the second half should continue to improve. But the Fed will also take into account the impact that normalization of monetary policy might have around the world. And we see that more recently that impact, at least in the last 2 months, on some emerging market economies has accelerated. Now, emerging market economies are large now, by 2017, about half of the world economy, and it's in nobody's interest to hurt those countries. However, as for any change, if you want, in regime, and when we normalize, we're changing regime, there's going to be some surprises in some area or some excesses that get corrected.
And when you talk about normalization of monetary policy, for those who are kind of thinking, my gosh, what does that mean? We're talking about not stimulating an economy through using measures like pumping money through from the central bank.
Yes, and I think the first step was actually a psychological step. When he started talking about it, what he did is planting the seed, really, that regime of ultra-loose monetary policy or ultra-loose liquidity has to end at some point. at that point, the market started doing the job for him. The yields went up, and that was, in my view, the first step. The second step will be to do less of the buying programs. And of course, the third step, which is not going to be for this year, clearly, is active interest rate increase. So I think it's a three-step process, and they're going to take their time.
All right, Virginie, good to see you.
Thank you.
She's staying with us. She'll return in about 5 minutes or so when we look through today's newspapers. But let's now squeeze in some other business stories, because we're focusing on Greece yet again. Will it need a third international rescue? Well, yes, indeed, not just according to Germany's finance minister. This is actually Greece's former finance minister who's saying this. George Papakonstantinou negotiated Greece's first bailout with the European Union, the International Monetary Fund and European Central Bank. He is still vilified today in his own country for the terms that he agreed then. But he's told the BBC's Hard Talk he believes Greece will need better terms if it is to get out of its current financial hole.
There could be a need for another bailout, as there is probably a need for some additional debt relief. I think that what most European partners are open to is some reduction in interest rates and some lengthening of the time horizon of the loans. But they don't like the idea of to turn around and tell the taxpayers, sorry, you've lent money to a country, part of that money is not going to be given back to you.
Other business stories. America's neighbour Mexico has more to fear than most about the Fed's decision. On Tuesday, figures confirm the Latin American economy is shrinking for the first time for 4 years. Wealth fell by 0.75% in the 3 months ending in June. That reluctance by American households to spend in times of uncertainty has hit exports of things such as clothes and building materials. It was once the biggest name in photography, and now Eastman Kodak has gained court approval to come out of bankruptcy as a much smaller digital imaging company. Founded in New York more than 100 years ago, the firm pioneered the use of film in cameras. It had planned to come out of bankruptcy in July. A US judge agreed to the company's plans, which means it should now be back and trading in about 2 weeks. Now, they say everyone has a novel in them, but the internet and new technology is making that dream of being an author a reality for more of us than ever before. Online self-publishing, bypassing agents and publishing houses, is now a fast-growing sector. Effectively, it puts the fate of new authors in your hands, the reader. Over the next few days, we'll be looking at who's succeeding in this brave new digital world. In our first report, Mariko Oy talks to an author in New York.
Meet Judith Glynn, one of a growing number of self-published authors. She's also a part of another booming trend. She chose to go paperless with her latest book. But in this small corner of her Manhattan apartment, writing can be a lonely business that requires a lot of help. So she went to a website called bibliocrunch.com and met her editor, Mercy Pilkington.
Hi, Mercy, it's Judith.
Hi, how are you? She posted her project for her editing needs. At the same time, the angels came down with a banner saying, you have to work with Judith, this is a great story. And so I bid on it.
I trusted BiblioCrunch, so I knew whoever came through them as a vendor was either vetted or they had people who had given them reviews, had worked with them in the past.
Miral Satter is their matchmaker. She set up bibliocrunch.com 2 years ago so that writers can find any help that they need.
We have everything from editors, cover designers, fact checkers, proofreaders, people who could build book apps for you, people who could do enhanced books, people who could do marketing, cover design, layout, everything. So the whole process.
And there's growing demand. Both ebooks and self-publishing have taken off in the last few years. Today, ebooks account for 20% of total publisher revenues, after growing almost 9 times in size compared to 4 years ago. And while figures do vary, almost 1/3 of books sold on websites like Amazon are now self-published. Whether print or ebook, the big publishers still own the big hits. But this new business model is posing a threat to the conventional industry, while allowing new authors to achieve their long-held dreams. Mariko Oy, BBC News, New York.
Just time to talk to you about the markets then, which are jittery and lower. This is the 5th day in a row of declines for most major markets in Asia. Only Australia at the bottom there, bucking the trend. South Korea down over 1%, as is Hong Kong. So we're keeping an eye on the Fed. Markets very jittery ahead of any news from the Fed later. That's the close in the States as well. And as you can see, the Indian rupee remaining at record lows versus the dollar. I'll see you soon for a look through the papers.